Welcome to Inside the She Cave, Trailblazers, Innovators, and Rule Breakers. I'm your host, Cindy Glanzrock. On today's episode, I'm pleased to welcome Elizabeth Bellak. I have been determined to share her story since I started this podcast. I had the privilege of hearing Elizabeth speak at the Museum of Jewish Heritage Women's Spring Luncheon earlier this year. Her strength, determination to survive, zest for life, humor, and courage all embody what it means to be a trailblazing woman and a rule breaker.
When I was in Warsaw and, we were hiding as Jews, I had no idea about thinking about my past and my actors. All I wanted to do is survive.
Elizabeth Bellak, born as Ariana Spiegel, is a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor and a former prominent child film star known as the Polish Shirley Temple. She was visiting her grandparents with her older sister just as the war was unfolding. Her older sister was killed, but Ariana survived and made her way back to Warsaw, along with a close friend's father. Ariana was baptized with the new name Elizabeta and sent to play a real-life acting role as a Catholic girl at a convent school. After the war, she made her way to New York with her mother via Austria and started her career as a school teacher. Years later, she was miraculously reunited with her sister's wartime diary, in which Renia had documented their family's experiences and shared intimate personal reflections. It's a remarkable diary and story that became a passion project also for her daughter, Alexandra, who will join us today on this podcast episode. I hope you enjoy our conversation inside the She Cave. I'm absolutely thrilled to have this trailblazing woman who's an innovator and a rule breaker, and we're going to find out why. Thank you for being here, Elizabeth Bellak.
I'll be happy to talk to you.
And I understand that you had another name originally you were born with, which was, what was your original name when you were born in Poland, and where were you born?
I was born in Poland. My name was Ariana Spiegel. I was born on the estate of my father in the fields. There was nothing but our house. My grandpa lived in the back of the house, and we lived in front of the house.
And this was where?
I was born in Stawki, which is southern part of Poland, in Galicia. And our house was about 10 miles from, Romania. And we used to go often to zachéćiki, which is the border between Romania and Poland. It's about 10 miles from my house.
Let me ask you something just about your family before we talk about what your activities that you did, what you love to do. When was your birthday?
I was born November 18, 1930, and I had a sister, and she was older than I, and she was my great sister. I love my sister. And she was very talented in different ways. I used to recite poetry, and she used to write poetry.
And what was your sister's name?
My sister's name was Aurelia Renata Spiegel.
You called her Renia? Is that the name of
your sister? We all call her Renia.
Now, I understand the math. You're 92 years old, so happy birthday.
Thank you.
Even
I'm still here to say thank you for my birthday.
Every day is another special day for you, right?
Right. Every day is my birthday. Now that I wake up and I see the world, so I'm happy.
Well, we're happy that you're here with us, especially after understanding what you have lived through, which is just remarkable that every day you have a smile on your face. By the way, we're also here with your daughter, Alexandra, Hello, Alexandra.
Hello.
He's Alexandra Renata Bellak. And my son lives in Amherst. He's Andrew Mark Bellak. And he has 3 boys.
Let me ask you, when you moved, obviously, to the States, which was how many years ago did you come to the United States of America?
I came to the United States in 1946 in December. And my grandfather's relative, his name was Bill Dubilier. His name was Dubilier. They lived 72 Esplanade in New Rochelle. And this young man was a doctor. He told us he went to Yale undergraduate and medical school at Columbia. But what did I know? What was Yale? And when we got to the house.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is the man who met you when you came here from.
Yes.
Where did you leave from, and where did you end up in New York? Where did you start?
We left the Bremen house, Bremen. That's a port in Germany. And we arrived at the pier here at Hudson. And Dubilier Willie came to get us with the car. Now, I knew nothing about America, I just
How old were you then? How old were you?
I think I was 16. 16.
You were 16.
I was 16. And my mother was young. She died. She was only 63.
What was life like for you when you were as far back as you can possibly remember, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years old? Tell me a little bit about your life in Poland.
I was already in Warsaw, but when I was born, I had a nanny. Her name was Kasia, I guess it was. And my sister was born somewhere else, and that nanny used to write to her. Her name was Clara Melis. Clara was a Jewish woman. Kasia was a Christian lady. And then Kasia left when I was a few years old, and she went to live in France and used to send me little presents. Now, we also had a cook. Her name was Hanya. I used to sit a lot in the kitchen with the cook and my dog, Ixie.
Your dog?
Yes.
You had a dog.
I was born, in the fields. There was nothing there but beautiful trees. We had ducks, we had geese, we had chickens, we had pigs, we had horses, and because we did everything with horses.
I understand. So you like to ride, and you also like to act and write and sing and play the piano. What else did you love to do as a child?
When I was young, we used to go to a town called Lvov, which is now called Lviv, which is part where I was born is now Ukraine. Ukraine where they're fighting. Not so much in that part right now, but Lviv was a very beautiful city. And I was on the radio when I was 5 years old, telling my sister's poetry, actually. So my mother thought that my sister was gifted in writing and I had a gift in speaking. So I was different. My sister was very melancholy and romantic and, look at the trees and singing of the birds and all that stuff. I was young, I looked up to my sister. So she was also on the radio in the town of Lviv. So we were very young. I was young to do that. But my sister had to go to school. There was no school where we lived. It was very far away. That's why my sister was put with my grandparents with the town of ｃhéměć. ｃhéměć is a very old town, and that museum in Polin, which means Poland in Hebrew, in Warsaw, tells the story of the Polish Jews in Poland. 1,000 years they were there, the Jews. But we had a king, cijሔměć Wielki, who had a girlfriend, Rachel. She was Jewish. So he was very good to the Jews. And
that's
in
interesting.
Krakow, Krakow is a beautiful city. In Krakow, there is a part of the city called ｃhéměć. And the Jewish people used to have restaurants and, all kinds of singing and stuff. So that's how Poland was.
So your mother wanted to support your career as a little child actress. And you have been described as the little Polish Shirley Temple. So
Yes.
Was that your dream? Did you want to be an actress when you were a little girl? Was that your dream?
Well, since I started on the radio and I, recited poetry of my sister and all that, I didn't mind not to be as a Polish Shirley Temple. I got a lot of attention, a lot of clapping of the hands. And, my mother took me, of course. She had a friend, a lady. who used to be an actress. She lived in a palace in Warsaw. Her name was άρχιչεύσκα. She was really a Jewish lady, married to a lawyer Kerner. She had a butler, she had a cook, she had a maid, she lived in a palace. They rented this palace on a main street called Krakowskie Przedmieście. That's where the hotel is, where actually we end up living during the war. She was an actress, young, and she took me under her wing. She taught me how to recite poetry. My life, she loved me. Her daughter lived in Paris. So one day I met her daughter. She was adorable. And she
this woman is who taught you how to act?
Yes.
How did you get the name the Polish Shirley Temple? How did they give you that? Why did they give you that name?
So I recited poetry of Julian Tuwim and Jan Brzechwa. Actually, they were both Jews and they were both baptized. They married, I think, Christian women. I went to their house because I was on the stage reciting the poetry. And they wrote about me in a magazine and said, this is now a wonder child. My mother saved that. That's how we knew about stuff, because how did I know? I didn't know anything. When we left Poland, I had no idea. But my mother, who never left Warsaw, she had all the papers and she had all the pictures. So she had a little strip that's in the book, and it says Ariana, Polish Shirley Temple.
Yes, we actually have that picture of
now,
you
in that
the
picture.
newspaper.
We found out that I was in 2 movies. One was called Granica, and one was called Gehenna. And apparently somebody else, we found another piece of paper. So when I was in Warsaw a few years ago, 3 times on television, a young man came and gave me another paper in which they said that this producer, Latest, took a little film of me, but he went to America and we never found the film. But he was also interested in me. And all these papers said that the foreign producers were interested in me.
So let me ask you something, Elisabetta. When you were a child, it wasn't as if you said, when I grow up, I want to still be an actress. When I go to America, I still want to be an actress, right? When you were a teenager, what was your dream? What did you want to be?
Well, when I was in Warsaw and, we were hiding as Jews, I had no idea about my, thinking about my past and my actors. All I wanted to do is survive.
Got it.
So, when Zygmunt took me out of the ghetto, he took me out first, and I had a best girlfriend. She was Christian. Her name was άρχιչεύσκα. She was my wonderful friend, and her 2 sisters went to school with my sister. Helped her write. We have 2 books of poetry to illustrate. They were wonderful girls. And Jitka was the youngest. She was my best friend. So the father took me into their house. And Zygmunt took my sister, his father, who was a doctor, and his mother, and took them out of the ghetto, which we didn't stay long because my grandfather paid off a policeman. So we were able to stay in our house on Słowackiego, was a main street in ｃhéměć. And we were able to stay a whole year there. Remember, when we left, we could only take 25 kilos of stuff. What do you take first? So, we were overwhelmed. We went to this new quarters that the Jews had to go. The mother's brother is a head of the Judenrat. So he's permitted to live outside the ghetto. So they take my sister and his sister and the husband, Zygmunt's father, and they hide them in a garage. And somebody rats on them and, of course, killed them all. I don't know anything about it. I am with Leszczyński in his house. And then after a week, under the auspices of death, he's taking me to my mom, with the Gestapo and the dogs, and he holds my hand. I'm only, at the time, 9 years old.
So when you
10,
left
maybe 10.
all by yourself. You were all alone
All
with
by
this man
myself.
and this man was the father of your friend, your girlfriend, right?
My girlfriend Jitka, yes.
And he was he a Catholic man?
Yes,
Was he a
he was
Christian?
Catholic, and he belonged to a organization called ច្ចৃ that helped the Jews in, you know which way? When they used to try to help beat the windows and try to interrupt the business, they used to try to help them. They were very nice people, very religious, but very good people.
You seem to have many people that tried to help you. You had sort of an angel looking over you, it seemed,
Yes.
all along the way.
So my Jewish grandma, Anna, used to collect for the poor Jews on Friday for Shabbat. She used to have the chickens, and they would come. She had a store in our building. And so they would come to her, and she would say, one day somebody is going to help you. And that's how it happened. She was such a good woman.
This
My
is your
mother's
grandmother.
Yeah, Anna,
this is,
she was a tall lady. My
I'm sure she was a
grandpa
beautiful.
little short.
Your grandfather was short, but your grandmother was tall.
She was, she was tall. And every Saturday, she had to close the store, and we would go together as a picture of me and her holding hands. We would go for a walk. They used to place called Zamek, which was up on the hill. There was a beautiful castle there. So my grandma would take me. And, I was a kid. I was small.
So was your grandmother a big influence on you? Besides who are the people who influenced you most?
My biggest influence was Mrs. άρχιչευσκα and my mom. My mom was very well educated. She was beautiful. My grandparents sent my uncle to France. He studied. He was engineer and architect, married into society of a French lady. And my mother was a beautiful woman. She went to Vienna to study. So her German was beautiful. Uncle Maurice was French beautiful. And then after that, my mother marries. But I never asked my mother where she married, she married my father. I have only one picture of my dad. And we can't find out where he died. He was a tall and the oldest of the 6 kids. My father has 3 sisters and 2 brothers. They all lived on land except one aunt.
Did you know your father's family well or not? Did you know them very well, your father's family?
Well, I knew them all. He had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. So Lila is in the book. That we found out, I think last year, that they live in Brazil. One of the sisters,
Right.
family. I mean, she died. She was in the same camp as I was in Germany, but I didn't know. And she didn't know our name was kszczyćka. It's crazy, for 1946 in Munich.
Was your mother encouraged to be very independent woman? She seemed very independent. She seemed very independent and she's very strong. And you seem very much that way. Where did she get that strength from? Was it from her parents?
I don't know. My grandmother was a very strong lady.
Right.
She had her own store, books and papers and everything. As I told you, she collected for the poor every Friday. She had the candles on Friday in the house. We had a maid too, the grandma had. And she didn't want to go. They were supposed to go to Canada to immigrate. She said, I wouldn't have a maid. I'm not going.
Was there anything in Poland in terms of your friends that really sticks out in your memory when you were there, like a kind friend of yours that did something wonderful that really taught you about how important it is to be loving and kind to people?
I went to that άρχιչευσka's house. You have no idea how beautiful that house is. It was a palace. And they had this chandelier. She had a beautiful dog. Rex was a big dog. And Toya, which means this is I, was a little dog. And the husband, during the war, he escaped. He was a lawyer, Kerner. He escaped. He went to Switzerland. I went there almost every day. Went with me over what I'm going to recite, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do. She adored me, that lady. She was my my everything. And she would go with my mother and sit in the Cyrulik Warszawski, which was a nightclub, and they would watch me perform. They were always in the audience.
So did you ever help someone else in your life? Have you ever helped someone when you were a teenager before you?
I always help somebody out if I can. Yeah, my mother, when we first came, she had no money. It was so hard. But I found a letter from the people that so how did we live? So this Reszczynski takes me to my mother, right?
Yes.
Where there's a priest and a friend of the family. Now, the woman was Jewish, but she became Christian marrying this Bereda, who was a wealthy Pole. His great uncle was a cardinal of Poland. She was Jewish. So she was my mother in the church, and they knew this priest, Father Majewski. Then he became a bishop, and he was on the border of the ghetto. He helped so many Jews, that man. And my mother used to help his church with the German, whatever he needed. He died of a heart attack. That curfew was 8 o'clock. So you couldn't get a doctor. He had a heart attack, and that was that.
I remember a story in the book where your mother was with you and they were separating the Poles and the Jewish people, and you were on a trolley, and the Germans came.
But the trolley is in the Christian section. Right. It's by the border of the ghetto. On the other side was a nut house. And they used to get called łapanka, which means catching. They used to catch people to go to work. So the trolley car had a division. Nur für Deutsche, the people should sit German only in the front, and the other Polish people in the back. So they told us to get out of thing. And my mother the guys were standing with the guns, outside. And they were putting the people on these big trucks to go to Germany to work. It was called łapanka. I was petrified, but my mom started to speak to me in German, just German. And so we were going to that hotel where she worked for dinner. And she said, "Come on, Yarusha," which means she used to call me that. "We're going to go now here," all in German. So the German soldier listened to German, figured we were German. So we go all day long. We were going because it was all over Warsaw that day.
I see.
All over, till we finally reached the hotel. And the man said to my mother, the director, Mr. Kosinski, "You're going to live in the hotel. This is too much."
Yeah, didn't you become very sick? Didn't you get jaundice?
So I got yellow jaundice from fear. So I could never give blood because, if you had yellow jaundice. So I was in bed, the doctor said I got yellow jaundice. And so we lived there. And my mother was educated, as you know. So she ran the hotel for the German. The German officers lived in that hotel, 5-star hotel.
And is that where she met the German officer?
Yes.
So she met him at the hotel.
My mother, one of the.
So tell us a little bit about the love story between your mother, and the German officer.
I didn't know anything because my mother, wherever she met the guy, I didn't see. We lived in our place. Maybe she went where he was. Maybe she had party. I don't know. But we lived there. We had to go to church every Sunday. The German soldiers were standing on the front of the hotel and on the back of the hotel. My mom and I, and this Kosinski Bolesław, he had a little son, Wojtuś. He and I used to play together. And I went to private school to learn Polish. This was finished because schools were not permitted for the Poles during the war. When the Germans were there, there was no school. So I was going there.
You seem as if education to you was just as important originally as it was to your mother, because you became a school teacher, of course, when you came here. But it seems like education was always that you learned. So when you were at the convent where you were going to school because you were baptized, is that correct? They baptized and they changed your name.
Oh, yes. Only the nuns knew about the bishop put me first in charity school. From charity, they put me in the school where they learned, because those nuns didn't have it. And I had to learn catechism and all that stuff. I did, as an actress. So you
put on a good performance.
And the nuns knew I went to church. And then my mother took me back home to the hotel. So I was lucky. But for a while, I had to stay in the church, in those schools.
Did you learn Hebrew? Did you study Jewish studies in your home?
No, we only spoke Polish. We never learned Hebrew, no. I think I used to know a little Jewish when I was a little kid.
Yiddish.
Yiddish, yeah. Yeah, because my grandparents spoke Yiddish, yes. But with us, they spoke Polish.
So
my sister was sent to this big professor. His name was Yershina, and he taught her Polonistic. So when we were in Warsaw and they were reading the book at the Polin, there was a lady there who was a professor of literature, and she said that my sister's writing was so sophisticated, and she was young. She wanted to be a writer, as you read in the book.
Yes.
She wanted to go to France. My uncle came to stuff me.
So this is
wanted my mother to go.
This book is wonderful.
This is in the River Nest.
I love this book, and I wanted to ask you. The book was published, and the diary was found, and it appeared in America all of a sudden. The diary by your friend, your sister's, the man that she speaks about in the book that she loved very much, right?
Zygmunt.
How do you pronounce his name?
He became a doctor. Zygmunt was his first name, Schwarze.
So Zygmunt
Schwarze means dark, black.
Black. So Zygmunt
Schwarze, the one that took me out of the ghetto.
That took you out of the ghetto. And he brought you her diary.
He saved my life.
He saved your life.
He brought, I want to go to that apartment. I haven't gone yet. It was on the west side where we were robbed when we first came. I think in 1950 or so. And he comes up the stairs. We lived on the first floor. And comes with this diary to my mom. I never knew my sister writing diary. Neither did my mom. He hands my mother this diary. We never asked him who kept the diary. We should have asked him, Zygmunt. He was now a doctor. He and this Marcel that was screaming at NYU, they were the best friends. He became a doctor in internal medicine.
So, Elizabeth.
And Zygmunt became a pediatrician.
So your friend Zygmunt.
First, he was a doctor for Air Force. And after that, in New York, and that's when he came to give us the book.
And this book has so much special heart and soul in it from your sister, Renia, about this man, Zygmunt.
My mother never read it.
Your mother never read it.
But
this is a photo of you and your sister.
She put it in a
bowl. Where is this photo taken of you and Renia?
So this is on that river that divides Zaleszczyki from Romania. We live on this side, so we used to go to that river. My mother used to buy sugar and pepper and paper, whatever we needed for the house. It was a little town. The ǩķē would bring us with the car. We used to go in the city.
So your sister and you were very close, obviously. So when you lost your sister, you had to continue on.
It was my mother never wanted to tell me for a while.
What?
Because, I was so heartbroken.
So this is.
She was my surrogate mother for 2 years.
Right.
When my mother was on that side, we didn't know. So I was with my old grandparents. They were older people, And my sister was young, and she had young friends. Took me to the party sometimes. I knew Zygmunt. He was so handsome, curly hair, dark, beautiful green eyes.
Well, your sister had good taste, and I saw a picture of your husband. I understand you met, and you were married very quickly, and he was very handsome too. And so your father, Alexandra, do you tell me a little bit? Was he someone that was an influence on you, your father or your mother, or who was it that was a big influence on you?
Oh, I think it's a combination. And I like to say that my father and I are the yin to my mother's yang because, she's outgoing and strong and dynamic. And I think my father and I are more introspective and reserved and
quiet.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a combination of both of them.
And your mother got into teaching as a school teacher like your father. Did they influence you in terms of your...
No, I got to teach because for 6 years I worked for the professor of anatomy at Columbia University Medical School. And Dr. Moss was so good to me like my father. My mother would call me 5 times a day. He said, Elizabeth is not here.
Where were you?
He told me, Liz, you're a born teacher. I never told him my past. He didn't know anything. And he didn't know I was on the stage. But once a week, he used to teach anatomy at night for the kids that couldn't, the medical student in the day. So I would help him out with the cadavers. Think of that formaldehyde. You have no idea. So he used to say, Liz, you could be a teacher. Why don't you? If you don't want to go to medicine or anything, I wasn't so good.
Did you encourage your daughter?
So that's how I became.
Did you encourage Alexandra to go to school and to become independent and educated?
Well, the Jewish people like education. You know that. We had Freud, we have Einstein, and people are Jews are very smart, right? Stuyvesant was so, education is the most important thing. As a saying in Latin, omnia mea me comporta, which means everything I know I carry with me.
Absolutely.
And so my kids were smart. My God bless my daughter, my son.
It must have been difficult to come here and put your children through school and educate them. And then...
It was very hard for me. I worked as a waitress in the daytime, went to Columbia at night and got my degree. My mother was so proud
Alexandra,
of me.
Do you think you have some
poor,
of that determination that your mother has in terms of being innovative and trailblazing and sometimes having to break rules in order to get ahead?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's genetic. I think it comes from my grandmother and my mother and Renia. And I think this resilience and persistence to get out there and be out there definitely came from all of this lineage.
George went to Columbia College and then he got a doctorate at Columbia.
This is your husband, George.
International education. He was not very aggressive, so he never got a big job. Thank God he was working in one of those towers, that went down. But that was for the Board of Higher Education. But then he went back to high school because his boss said, listen, you can get a tenure here. You don't have tenure there. So he stayed, thank God, not in the building.
Right, thank God. I think there were some angels looking over you, your mother, and then your family today. I think you have... I was lucky enough to be at the spring luncheon. That's a picture, of course, of you.
All the lovely ladies.
And that was such a wonderful luncheon at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, where, as they describe here, you were described as the hidden child of the Holocaust. You're doing so much talking and you're getting so many awards. And as actually my podcast producer, ｃhéǐცǐცǐცǐცǐცǐცǐცǐ said, it's remarkable because you're sort of this person that wants to keep teaching and the importance of honoring not just your religion and who you are and where you came from, but the importance of the heritage of Jewish people and telling the story and not hiding from telling the story.
Right.
So tell us a little bit, what are you doing these days to tell the story, and why are you now comfortable telling the story?
Well, my mother never wanted to talk about it. She never read my sister's book. She never wanted to talk about it. It was too much. Losing everybody. It's terrible. But I decided with my daughter, it was Alexandra who went to the vault, got this diary, and said, what's in it? It was in Polish, all these pages. So she got somebody in Poland, a young man. He cursory translated. So she said it's important for the world to know how young people lived, how the Jews were persecuted, how the Russians were there. People should know. I want to do it. I did it for so many schools, like I do it with you, to tell the young people, we live in America. We live in it's surrounded by no war. So you can't, in Europe, people had an uncle, a mother, a father, and, nephew who were in the war. They understand because they were in it. So it's different. So you have to tell the people, and you don't want persecution here. You want tolerance. God, people want to go synagogue, they got to kill them. They go to mosque and pray. Why? They all pray to God. The Catholics, it's not fair. Where is the tolerance? Too much hate.
Yes, well, as we know, there's an incredible exhibit at the Museum of Jewish Heritage about why people hate. And it's about the heritage of the Jews and how much they were hated for their entire life. Now, we still have quite a bit of anti-Semitism on the rise right now. So people like you speaking to organizations and institutions are incredibly important. And Alexandra, I understand that your mother has given some recent talks and received an honor recently. Can you tell us about what that was that she spoke at? There was an event you just said that she attended and she was given an honorable mention of some sort.
Well, the book is going to be taught in schools in Poland. So she recently did a video that will accompany this animated video that will be taught in the Polish school system. And obviously that's important because as we get farther away from the actual events, the Holocaust is no longer something that people are talking about, thinking about teaching necessarily. So it's important that she's involved in this project.
You've been beside your mother, great, great, great devotion and love and incredible commitment to make sure her stories have been told. And that she's a very young 92-year-old, but she still needs to be looked out for because I could tell she could get into trouble because she likes to have fun.
She takes care of it. That's it. And she's the one that took the book out of the vault. She's the one that.
And how did you find this? How did you find the publisher?
They actually found us because they had heard about the story. There was a 2-page spread in the New York Post and then a 20-page spread in the Smithsonian. So actually, St. Martin's Press came to us.
It was also the Times.
Yeah, and the New York Times.
And you were on the bestseller list of the New York Times as an international bestseller. Wasn't that true? Yes, that's incredible. To think that your sister...
And we were on television in Poland. We were on television 3 times in Poland. And 5
You went back to Poland. That must have been difficult for you.
The first time I went to Poland, I got sick. So Marcel, the doctor, said she wouldn't have let me go because we went to Auschwitz. And I was pretty sick. My son saw the children's, that we went to see the movie, and you see the whole lot of kids' shoes. I never saw Andrew cry that much anywhere. So it was terrible. So when I came back, I was actually sick. So I went there 17 years ago, first time. And we went to Krakow, and then we went to µěřička, which is salt mines. And then we went to Buchenwald, that's
Auschwitz and
Birkenau.
Yeah.
Birkenau. And it's a terrible
So you came here when you were 16 years old, and you didn't go back till you were almost 75 years old?
No, I went to see my uncle in 1959, first time.
No, but Poland you didn't go back.
Yeah. I never wanted to go because I couldn't. But then but when I went on the television already 3 times, in Warsaw, I didn't mind it. But when I saw Auschwitz, I got sick. Terrible story, terrible. I could never go to Przemyśl again.
Let me ask you something. You had another last name, Elizabeth, before you were married. So you've had 3 names. Spiegel, and then what was the next name you had?
Elżbieta Leszczyńska. There was a king of Poland, Leszczyński.
And then you met someone.
But the papers didn't synchronize with my mom. Because the papers...
So you had a different name than your mother?
No, it's the same name. She wasn't married. But later on, she just said I was her daughter.
So it was interesting.
You know, you could get what you could get. It was the dead people papers that you
Right.
got. So this ｃ혜ციცი치, friend of the Bereda family, the woman was Jewish, you know, introduced us to the priest. He sold us.
Well, it's
the paper.
interesting to me because
was a
now you have a
friend.
daughter named Alexandra. And, you know, my family had the name Alexanders. And I had that funny story with you where you told me you actually worked for Alexanders for a little while when you came to America.
That's right. That was my first job after college. But I didn't last
No one
too
does.
long.
No one lasts too long there.
I was the head of the stock. I
department.
worked for 5 people.
It was a lot of work, you said. Very hard.
And then I got the job with Medical Center.
Well, that was a
Columbia.
big promotion from Alexander's stock department. So let me ask you something.
A friend
If
of
you
mine gave me
could
that.
have an opportunity today to go have lunch or dinner with anyone, who would the both of you, who is a woman or a man that you'd want to sit down and have sitting at your table that has influenced you, who you think is innovative, who's maybe a rule breaker like you've had to be in order to survive? Who would that person be? I mean, it could be Marie Antoinette. It could be the Queen of England. It could be J-Lo.
I would like to have Spielberg to talk to and make a movie of my sister's book.
I love that. Okay. We're going to put that out in the atmosphere, and we're going to pray. We're going to dobbin. Okay, we're going to dobbin.
I mean, they made the movie, right? You know, they came here. Now, the Polish man made a movie. What's that movie?
Which one?
The book.
Oh.
So there was a Polish man who was a producer. The movie I was in was called Gehenna. His name was Mike.
He was a director.
Director was Michał Wasinski. He was really a Jew from the 30s and a homosexual. Imagine that, in Poland. So he changed his name to Michał Wasinski. He married an Italian princess who gave him a Rolls Royce and all that, made 42 movies, and I was in one of his movies. So everybody is dead from his movies. They made a movie about him, came to New York and interviewed me. I'm in that movie, and it won the Lion.
The Golden Lion in Venice.
And what is it called again?
The first prize. So they showed it here.
It's called the Prince and the
Dybbuk. And the director's name is what?
It's a documentary about Michał Wasinski. And he made 42 movies. My mother's the only person still alive from his movies.
That's remarkable.
So they introduced me at Lincoln Center to the people who saw the movie. And they said, this is a movie. And you remember when we went to that show downtown? When you met me?
The museum.
So there was a German ambassador there. And this man invited us to the party. And at the party, he said, here's Dr. Ruth, and here's the Polish
Shirley Temple and Dr. Ruth. What have you not done in your life? You've seen a lot and you've done a lot. What that have you not done that you still want to do? And before you answer that question, there's something in your life that you haven't done that you still want to do. I want to ask your daughter, Alexandra, who is the woman that you want to have at that lunch or dinner?
I mean, here we are, we're women talking amongst women. So I was thinking Hillary Clinton and Gloria Steinem and Malala, whose last name I always have difficulty pronouncing, and Michelle Obama. And I would love to bring back Renia.
I would love to too. We'd all love to have Renia at the table. And is there something that you can tell us that you haven't done yet that you plan on doing besides your mother? Have you both discussed amongst yourselves something you would love to do? Maybe it's having a Broadway show about Renia's diary. Maybe it's about traveling to Paris together for a weekend. Is there anything both you would love to have done or still want to do?
I would like to go to Europe one more time before I die, but I don't know if I
We used to travel to Europe. We'd
Every
use
week.
Paris as a stomping ground, and then we'd move on. But we went for the last 10, 12 years, and then when COVID hit, we haven't been since. So I think that's on our list of definitely things to do in the
So I
coming
would describe
months.
your mother as fear.
You know, she got something at Yad
What's that?
Vashem. She honored Leszczynski. So they had the ceremony.
They're going to have a ceremony. It's just been delayed. They're waiting for the medal to arrive, and that will take place in Poland, and it can also take place in Israel. So that would be another journey I would like to make. I don't know if my mother can make it. It's a little lengthy.
And this is a trip,
But,
and this is an honor
It's
that
hard
you're
for
that
me
is being
now.
given by who? By Yad Vashem. Can you repeat? And it's being
Yad Vashem, yes, for the man who saved her life and the family who saved her life. So they're just waiting to receive the medal before they'll have this ceremony. But it's
She worked so hard to
and the
do
man
that.
who saved your life and the family, are some of the
So-
family members still living?
yes, they are, and they would also be able to attend. So that would be really gratifying.
So is there
Yeah, he actually did that, and I tell you, on the death penalty, he didn't care. He wanted to save me.
Well,
So nice.
was he the
I
same?
mean, for
was
nothing,
he
you know?
was
No
he the
money,
man? I'm sorry,
nothing.
I'm interrupting you. Was he the man that when you got off the train, I think you were in Warsaw, there was someone who started saying, "That's the Jewish little girl.
Yeah.
That's a Jewish little girl." Can you tell us that quickly, that story? What happened?
Yeah. He said, I will kill you. He said, I'm going to kill you right now. There is no such thing. So the man ran away. Lucky for me.
And lucky for
And
him.
lucky for him.
And lucky
he is
for him.
he was
He would
a
have been killed
very determined
course.
man to save your life. And he knew your whole family, right?
Very. Oh, yes, of course.
So this
you
is
know, they knew my family. He was a man, had a factory, something with coffee.
so is there a
Yeah. And I used to go to the house. I mean,
So would
she
you
was
consider-
my friend. I have
would
a
you
picture
consider
of her.
yourself lucky, smart, spiritual, religious? How would you describe yourself? And
Lucky.
Alexandra, how about you?
I am lucky.
You're a spiritual woman.
Spiritual.
And you're a lucky woman.
Spiritual.
My sister was spiritual, and they asked me if feel guilty. I just feel lucky. How many Jews died in the war? How many of my family died? I don't even know what. We just got something about my aunt, what she had to do. Oh my God, she dies in Israel, poor.
Well, you're
know,
an amazing woman because
Awful.
your story makes people realize how fortunate and lucky they are. I don't know if you're bringing yet peace to the world, but I know you're working on that. You want to see peace in the world.
I'm working. If I could, I'd be going to Mr. Putin. Say, come on, stop this lousy war.
And she
Yes,
could say it in
I
Russian.
want you to say
Yeah.
a Polish and Russian expression. Teach us something today that is meaningful to you before we end our call together. Is there a wonderful expression?
She could tell a great
Do you
poem
want to give us a poem?
in Polish.
Well, as long as someone's
Would
going to
you want the
translate it.
poem?
I think there was an expression when
let
we
me
had
see.
drinks and dinner together about how you can't change things the way things are the way they are. And you said it to my brother when we were together.
So było, a nie jest, nie pisze się wrejest. That's what I said. So było, a nie jest, nie pisze się wrejest. What was and isn't, you shouldn't
Would you
bother.
say it one more time very slowly for
Because
the camera?
it's finished. So było, a nie jest, nie pisze się wrejest.
I think that's and yourself, Alexandra, is there any
That's
words
right.
of wisdom
But I used to
for
know,
us?
like,
I would like Renia's hopes and dreams and struggles to be a compass for the troubled times.
when I sometimes think of my sister, I think that she wanted to be famous, and now she is famous. She's in 24 countries. They have translated her book. In France, they did it 3 books. Not 1, not 2. For adults, for children, and what else?
And teenagers
And
That's
to
teenagers.
amazing.
teach in the schools.
I
Well,
mean,
I
she
have
is
to say
famous,
the
my sister. So, for my sister, but
I'm sorry.
you know, she's gone. Yeah,
young,
young,
but she lived. I think
full of
from reading
hope.
this book, she was a dreamer like no one I
Yeah.
ever have known. I mean, she was an incredible dreamer, your sister, and she was so romantic, so romantic. And
Yes.
she,
Yeah. And all those poems she wrote. And she was president of the literary club, and she was in a Russian newspaper. She was young and so famous
there's this
then.
one beautiful poem on January 14th, 1941. I mean, she's obviously the book is filled with poetry. Very independent, beautiful sister you had.
You know, my mother was a great lady, and she really missed my mom so much. And so she was like my substitute a little bit, you know. She was my like surrogate mother to me. I had nobody. We didn't know what was my father.
It's a
was
horrible
terrible.
loss, but we're so lucky that
I
God saved
survived
you,
it.
or someone was looking out for Ariana Elisabetta. So
I know.
I just want to thank you for being the trailblazer, the rule breaker, the innovator, the smiler, the storyteller, and the caretaker.
I always have optimism.
You always were optimistic that you would survive.
survive.
Well, thank God you're here. We're so lucky to have known you and to continue to know you as you blaze new trails.
We thank you so much for taking interest in us. We appreciate that very much, Cindy, and we hope to see you. And we thank you again that you wanted to.
Well, I feel
have
very
something
fortunate
do
to know
with
you
us.
both, and I'm very fortunate for the Museum of Jewish Heritage, which, as we know, is a living memorial to the Holocaust, as you are a living memorial to the Holocaust. So thank God for these types of organizations. So I'm going to do a shout out that anyone who is interested in the Museum of Jewish Heritage down at 36 Battery Park Place, that you visit. There's some wonderful exhibitions. They're hard to take, but they're beautifully done. Very professionally done, and they're very truthful and honest about the history of Jews who unfortunately have a rough ride. Speaking of people that have really had to fight hard as you did. So thank you for being in our lives,